Hello and welcome to the Q&A session for our fifth webinar in round 2 of the NDIS Success Program. Our topic today are questions that we've received and talking about strategies for success. Community Business Bureau acknowledges the traditional owners of country throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and community, and we pay our respects to them and their cultures, to elders past, present and emerging. And presently, Jane and I are sitting on lands of the Kaurna people here in Adelaide. My name's Andrew Ellis. I'm a business consultant at CBV, and I'm joined by Jane Arnott, our General Manager for Consulting and Business Services. Today, we're going to go through questions we've been asked in the last week since the Strategies for Success webinar went live. Thank you to those people who've submitted questions via Facebook, LinkedIn or email. We've grouped our questions for today into a few different themes. So we're going to start off talking about marketing strategy, then marketing plan, and then after that, marketing activities, starting to get a bit more granular and detailed in terms of the focus there on the marketing activities. Before we start though, it is worth mentioning that some new data has come out from the NDIS this week, and that'll be of interest to many different people. It includes a new market monitoring report. So there's graphs, tables, data, looking at indicators across regions and participants from October 2019 to March 2020. It includes detailed dashboards showing where support provision is higher or lower. And there's really a lot of granularity at a local government area region level. So for example, you can get down to basically the local council area that you are in or that you're servicing, and be able to see information on types of disability, numbers of participants, values of plans, and the utilisation rates, how it relates within that area. So it's a lot of really good, valuable data. Second thing that's come out is a report on young people in the NDIS. So that's those aged 0 to 14 years. There's also a report on how people experience the NDIS across different classifications of remoteness. So again, some really rich data on profiles in regional and remote areas, and will be of great assistance to people who are working in those regional communities. And then lastly, there's a new report which has brought in data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics on the prevalence of psychosocial disability in Australia. So there's a lot of information about living arrangements, need for assistance, employment, discrimination, and impairments that are contributing to psychosocial disability. So if any of those topics sound of interest to you, I would thoroughly recommend go looking, Googling, have a look around the NDIS website, and you'll find more information on those reports that have come out this week. Let's get into our main topic for today. So we're going to start off with marketing strategy. So Jane, how would we translate our business or our overall organisation strategic plan into a marketing strategy?
Yeah. So obviously look at what you want to achieve with your overall strategic plan, business plan for your organisation, and thinking about, from those goals and objectives you have in that plan, which of those need some form of marketing activity. So that could be about growth objectives, or wanting to increase impact, perhaps wanting to operate in a different area. So any kind of things that might involve you reaching into new markets and growing the number of customers, or even retaining existing business. So look at those goals and objectives from a marketing perspective, and really start working out who your target audience is. So quite often people might go, well, we want to reach everybody. Well, it's unrealistic to try and reach everybody. So really try and narrow down who your customer segment is that you're trying to target with your services. Think about yourself as an organisation, or if you're a sole trader, what are your brand values? So what are the things that, in terms of the way that you operate and what's important to you, that you need to communicate? Because people buy on a financial decision. In the NDIS, we've got some fixed pricing, so they're also choosing people that they feel have got the right values set or are aligned in some way. So thinking about your brand values is really important, and understanding the competitive space. So who are the competitors that are providing the same service as you, to the same type of clients in the same geography? And when you look at who you are, what your values are, who your competitors are, who your target market is, you can start pulling out your value proposition and the value that you're offering to your customers, and your points of difference from your other competitors. So that foundation work is really important in terms of then determining your key messages to your target audience and how you're going to reach them. And thinking about the channels and the different kind of gatekeepers or stakeholders or influencers that might help you reach your target audience, as well as any opportunities you might have to go direct to them. So once you've fleshed all of that out, you should hopefully then be in a position to look at all of the actual activities that you want to deliver in order to reach that target audience, and those activities form your plan. So your strategy is your big picture objectives, that definition of target market, messaging, value proposition, etc. And then your plan is the activities that sit underneath that, and then from your plan you can then obviously start working through what the budget might be for that. So you should really see this thread going through from your business plan or your strategy and business objectives through to your marketing strategy, through to your marketing plan, and then that gets reflected in your budget.
Great answer. So a lot of that, I guess, is focused probably a bit more on medium-sized enterprise, where they're going to have a lot more rigor around those sort of things, and maybe even bigger businesses. So I've got another question here. I'm a sole trader. Where should I start on marketing?
Yeah. So as a sole trader, I'd say quite often repeat business is your most important business. So it's much cheaper and easier to keep customers than it is to find new ones. So really make sure that you do what you do well, because obviously that will enable you to retain your existing business. Then I think it's really, again, it's some of the same principles apply, but really thinking about where do you want to get to. So if you want to stay as a sole trader, how many customers do you need, and how much volume of service do you need to supply in order to keep your business going? Do you want to grow? So that might be working in partnership with somebody or taking on staff. So really getting that sense of what your business objectives are, so that you can really think about the level of growth or retention that you need in order to deliver that. And then, many of the same principles apply. So, understanding what's special to the market about you. So, is that about the way you deliver your service, where you deliver your service, something personal that you bring in terms of how you deliver service? So, your personal brand values, if you like. And again, who your competitors are. You may have other sole traders out there. You may be competing against some really big businesses. So what's your point of difference between the other sole traders or the small, medium or larger size organisations that are providing the same kind of service? Because some people will want that comfort of going with the big brand, but others might say, actually, I'd much prefer to have the personal relationship of working one-to-one with a sole trader. So really thinking through what your value proposition is, again, and your point of difference into the market. And then just kind of have a look at what you've got now in terms of marketing. So you might have a lot of assets out there already in terms of a website or a Facebook page. And a lot of smaller businesses just use Facebook now. They don't necessarily need to have their own websites. They don't necessarily feel that you need to invest in a web presence from a website perspective. But think as well, as with any larger strategy, where are you going to find those new customers? How are you going to reach them? As a sole trader, you might want to work on more of a word of mouth basis, particularly if you're working in a very localized community, and thinking about the networks within those communities that can help you to get referrals, and look at what you've done so far and what's worked well for you. So if you've got something that's working, how can you do more of it rather than try and do something completely different? And there are some pretty inexpensive ways to market nowadays. So as we said, social media provides a good platform. If you do want to have a website, you can set up some websites pretty cheaply, with a bit of help if you're not so technically minded yourselves, but lots of people do their own. And you can, put a little bit of money into paid ads on social media. They're not terribly expensive, but obviously, again, you need to probably be thinking a bit about how and where you're advertising in order to make sure you get bang for your buck where you do spend.
Where your targets are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a lot of customization that you can do on your target audience when you're paying for ads there on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking about social media, Andrew, What kind of social media platform should people be on?
Yeah. Well, we're going to start off answering that question, just coming back to strategy and marketing strategy. And I think that's going to be a theme that's going to come through this Q&A today, is just about start from the strategic plan and start from your marketing strategy. Rather than get too in the weeds, you need to sort of think about that first. So in terms of what social media platforms to be on, it all depends on your target audience. And you might need to be on different platforms to be reaching different audiences. Each of those social media platforms kind of requires its own mini strategy. So thinking about what target audience you're going to communicate with on there and how you're going to use that segment's positioning to generate conversations with that audience. So it might be that there are certain types of posts that you could just push the same thing out to 2 or 3 different channels, but what you'll see in most organizations is they'll have a slightly tweaked or customized or a different variant that they'll put on Instagram versus Facebook versus LinkedIn, which is more business audience as well. Facebook obviously has the biggest followings, but it can be an older demographic, and younger people these days will say that they don't want to be on Facebook because that's where their parents are. So Instagram typically for younger audiences, and increasingly TikTok, though there have been obviously some security questions and challenges around that that have been asked at the moment. If you're operating across multiple social media platforms, it can be useful to have an integration software, and I've used Hootsuite before, but there are other programs around like that that act as an integrator across your social media platforms. And also remember, the algorithms are now against businesses, so you'll need to allow budget to invest in each platform. Make sure your posts reach the audience that you have in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Jane, sort of following on from social media, how should one structure their online presence?
Yeah. So I think I'm going to go back to strategy again. So, do you have a strategy in place with objectives and a target audience? Because that's where you should start. And certainly from our perspective at CBB, we did a lot of work with organisations around the period of NDIS transition. And we had a number of organisations come to us saying either, can you help us develop a new website, or our website isn't working for us. And quite often when you unpick that, it's because the organisation doesn't necessarily have a clear strategy around, who they're trying to reach, what their offering is, what their value proposition is, and what they want to achieve from their website. So really have that clearly in place first, so you make sure that you're actually making the most of your web presence. And it also means that if you know what you're trying to achieve, then developing the content and maintaining the content becomes a lot more straightforward. If you do choose to have a website, we recommend that you try and set everything to route into your website. So that enables you to kind of really build your search engine optimization, so your SEO, so that improves people's ease of finding you when they search. But it also enables you to do some more tracking, so you can see kind of who's coming to your site and those kind of things. One of my personal little bugbears is when people don't profile on their website who the people are behind the organisation. I think if you're coming to a service provider to request services that could be, either for yourself or for a loved one, you want to know who the people are that are responsible for providing those services, and potentially who some of the frontline service providers will be as well. So, who the kind of support workers that might be working with me, or the person that I care for, because you're putting a lot of trust in your service providers to either look after yourself or look after a loved one. So I think having that sense of who's behind the business and who's on the front line can be really important for web presence.
It's part of the brand, really, and it's part of the market, that it's a very person-centered market to be in, so it really makes a lot of sense to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's one of the important things in terms of content that I'd like to see on there. And similarly, I think from a graphics perspective, it's worth thinking about what are the images that you're putting on the site and how do they relate to the people that you're working with. So, with this program, we're particularly keen to connect with Aboriginal organisations, organisations providing services to culturally and linguistically diverse communities, and to organisations operating in regional and rural and remote areas. So, if you're working with that kind of cohort of clients, what are the images that you've got on your site that says, I'm accessible to you? Are you providing opportunities? I mean, you can do a lot with translation tools and stuff like that now to make your material accessible. So I think those things are important. And then from a social media perspective, where you've got a website, look and see if you can get your social media pages and emails, etc., all linking back to your website. So you're driving people back to your website all the time. And that, as we say, helps with search engine optimization. It can also help people to find other services. So it might be that they're coming to you for one service, you drive them to your website, and if you're offering multiple different services, they might then find out about different things that you're doing. So it helps you with that client retention and expansion as well. And similarly, in terms of if you have a newsletter or a blog or something like that, use that to drive people back to your website as well. So there's a range of different tools available, but ideally try and push them through to your website.
Great.
So we talked a bit about some of the strategic stuff. Andrew, who would or could promote a business? So if you're looking to work with other agencies to help you with promotion, where do you go?
Well, the answer is a bit like how long is a piece of string, but it depends really on the nature of your services. But I guess we can give a general answer that people can apply to their own specific situation. And I think when you're looking at what other organisations you can leverage or partner with to promote your own business, it's useful to start with some stakeholder mapping. Just by thinking about who are other people or organisations that are working with your target group of NDIS participants. And if you identify who they are, that's going to give you a bit of an indication of who some key influencers are. And then you can think about how you can leverage some of those relationships and some of those providers that might be in areas near you. So just as examples of who that might be, it could be GPs, could be other healthcare services or other health providers. Support coordinators, local area coordinators obviously have a significant role to play within the NDIS and influence many decisions. And then other complementary services. So, if you're providing one type of service that's not competing with another organisation, you might find that there's a relationship that you can have with them, even informally, of sort of referring customers, from one organisation to the other.
And so how do you reach those kind of agencies?
So when providing information to those promoters or influencers, have a think about what it is that, what's in it for them and what is it that they're looking for. What are the services that they're providing and what's unique about them, their availability. Think about whether they understand your product or service, and if they do, then obviously that's going to help, but otherwise you might need to do a bit of education there. And I think being clear on the what's in it for them is really important. And if you can refer people to that provider as they're referring people to you, there's a clear win-win in being able to engage on something like that. But also it can be that you might feel an unmet need for some of the customers that other provider, other individual has. So could be that you're helping them help their customers to get a better overall service. And again, that's going to reflect positively on them if they refer people to you that you can deliver on that.
Yeah, I think one of the other things there is thinking about, the route that maybe customers might come into receiving services. So, we did some stakeholder mapping a few years ago for an organisation that was working with people with newly acquired brain injury or neurological disability, and obviously they're coming through some healthcare routes related to kind of diagnosis and treatment and rehab and that kind of stuff. So, what's the journey that people might go on from a personal health or disability perspective before they reach you, and then what are the touch points that you can connect with to start promoting the services?
Yeah, and that's especially true for disability that gets acquired or what have you at a later point in life. Yeah, absolutely.
And then when it comes to events, Andrew, how important can those be in your marketing plan? It's a bit tricky in certain areas now with COVID-19, but there's still some kind of online or face-to-face events happening. So how do you use those? Anyone
who had events in their plan in 2020 has probably crossed those line items out and maybe hopefully got some budget left over to do some other things. But yeah, you're right. Many events have been cancelled due to COVID-19, and so I think, and even just in our own CBB experience, we've still been involved with some conferences that have moved online rather than being delivered face to face. And I think in all those instances, it's good to, where there are options like that and opportunities like that, it's good to proceed if you can, but just be eyes wide open to any contract terms that relate to cancellation. It's probably something to be more aware of and alert to at the moment than previously. Again, come back to strategy, come back to your objectives, and what's the target audience that you're looking to reach through those events. There are so many different types of events that you can have and so many different purposes, why you might have one. For some organisations, it could be about fundraising, which could be attracting new donors, or it could be about awareness raising to potential customers interested in your services, and it could be so part of that could be just about awareness raising, or it could be about looking to sign up new customers at the event. So there's many different types of objectives, and it's good to be specific about what it is that you're aiming to get out of the spend that you would have on that event. You need to have a look at who do you expect to be there, who's the target audience. Will the event be attended by your customers, or is it about people who influence your customers, or is it about people who are making decisions on the behalf of your customer? So family members, other health professionals can all be part of your target audience that you might want to reach out to through different style of events. In a pre-COVID-19 world, and hopefully again after, there's been many disability expos run across the country, and those can be quite worthwhile, that bring people together. They bring NDIS participants into forums like that, looking for ideas and innovation and new services and organisations that they want to interact with, so they can be a great pathway as well. You can also think about events from a customer retention angle, and I know I've had experience with this in the past, but sometimes service providers might put on a free night with some nibbles and a speaker a couple of times a year, and that can be a great value add to your existing customer base, just to be able to provide some education in a group setting, and even bring a group of your own clients together, and they can meet each other and build and learn from that experience as well. So there's so many different ways that you can run events, so many different types of events, and some of the big ones might not be on the agenda at the moment, but in some states, some of those smaller events are starting to become easier to do and organise now. So plenty of options.
Now, this takes us to the budget question. Obviously, there's a cost in events, but generally, how should people determine a marketing budget?
So I wrote a blog post earlier this year talking about how to build up a marketing budget. So if you go to the CBB website, you'll be able to look through our news articles and be able to find that there. But again, it comes back to your business objectives and therefore your marketing objectives. My recommendation would be that you start with what's called zero-based budgeting. Start with a blank sheet of paper. Have a look at what issues you're facing and how you want to achieve those objectives, and then you could research some marketing activities that you could help to overcome those different issues and those objectives. That could be events, it could be public relations, it could be advertising, it could be through investment in your website, social media channels, all those sorts of things. By assigning each activity an anticipated outcome, you'll be able to look at how much money you'll need to spend in order to achieve those overall objectives. And really, it'd be just a process of writing down the sorts of activities that you think will be worthwhile in helping you achieve your objectives, and then having a bit of an estimate or an educated guess at how much each of those activities are likely to cost. I think that when putting a marketing budget together, from my experience in the past, there's always sort of what you start out with as the plan, and then often there'll be opportunities that'll come up later that you hadn't necessarily thought of, but that you want to have a bit of money up your sleeve to spend in. So whatever your activities in your budget add up to, it's worth just putting a bit of extra at the bottom for contingency or an allowance for other unidentified things, just to be able to have a little bit up your sleeve to invest when those opportunities do present themselves. So turning our mind down into the weeds and marketing activities, Jane, what are some practical tools to help someone with their marketing?
Yeah. So I think, again, assuming that you know your audience, so what you're trying to achieve, and that you've got some kind of plan in place. We've spoken about kind of selecting social media channels that best appeal to your target demographic, but then also obviously you're going to look at things like email marketing. So you've got tools like MailChimp, ActiveCampaign that might suit you as a means of getting emails out to your clients or potential clients. There's also tools available for text messaging, so for sending SMS. So depending on, again, your target audience, it might be more appropriate to communicate with them by SMS than it is via email. And it's also worth thinking about, the volume of clients and the volume of communication you're doing. So certainly once you get up to a significant number, you might be looking at actually, can we use a customer relationship management, so a CRM type tool for marketing, as well as for managing your day-to-day client business. So a lot of CRM tools will have, that kind of marketing, business development type functionality in with them, as well as the service delivery aspect. A lot of those kind of digital tools will have some kind of free online training resources available. Now, obviously, those are usually geared towards promoting that particular tool, but they could be some useful tips for you using those free resources. So have a look for what's available there. And a lot of tools themselves will be free for, they'll tend to run on a kind of freemium type model. So you get the basic functionality for free, but once you need to go to more complex functionality, or you get volume above a certain level, then you start paying for that tool. But if you are a not-for-profit, do look for the not-for-profit discounts, because a lot of software providers will offer some quite meaningful discounts for not-for-profit organisations.
Absolutely. So is there a best time of day or a best day in the week that you think to post to your social media, or to push out an email to your MailChimp group or something like that?
So I don't think there's any single universal best time of day. It really depends on your organisation and the customers that you're trying to reach. So, it's very, very dependent on the profile of your customers. But with some trial and error, you'll probably be able to work out which days or which times a day are most successful in terms of getting engagement. A lot of it comes down to common sense. So think about the times that your customers, that your target market that you're trying to reach, are most likely to be picking up their phone and looking at their social media. So is that going to be, at breakfast? Is it going to be when they've dropped the kids off? Is it going to be over lunchtime at the end of the day? So just, think about their kind of lifestyle patterns, if you like, and when they're most likely to be looking at their social media. I would really suggest trying posting at different times of day and different days of the week, and seeing what the response is. So some of that response will obviously be driven by people's engagement in the content, but some of that will be around, that's the time that people are looking at their social media. And over time, you'll start getting a sense of what's most successful internally from that respect. There's a non-NDIS, but a social media group that I'm in, and I spoke to the moderator and I said, I need to post something. What's the time that's most likely to get me a response? She said Wednesday morning, so before 11 o'clock. So she was able to give me really day of the week, time of the day that would be the best time to get a response. So it's really worth monitoring to see how your audience behaves on social media. And then obviously you can also look at whether you can do some boosting. So, the costs of boosting stuff on Facebook, things like that, are actually pretty low per boost. You can obviously spend a lot of money, but it's worth trying out some of that stuff with a small budget and see what response you get. And then obviously you can do more as you learn what's most effective.
I think it's just so important to have a think about this. It's there's probably lots of organisations out there who post at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because that's when the part-time marketing person's at work before they head home early or something like that, and you can set things up to schedule to be released at certain times, or other times you might think, oh, I just want to push this out, and you send it out at 10 o'clock in the morning. But if you actually wait until 5:30 that night, perhaps, then you might find 3 times the response rate as what you had in the morning. So it's worth being strategic thinking and planning in terms of how to get the best impact out of those postings. So that's good.
Yeah. Now, advertising, Andrew, we've had this question a number of times where clients call us and they just say, somebody's contacted me saying, offering me a discounted advert in their publication, should I go for it? So, how do you decide whether to take up that advertising opportunity or not?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've had plenty of examples of that too, and I think it's worth just coming at this question from the perspective of they're trying to ask you to help solve their issue rather than coming to you with something that's necessarily going to fit as part of what your marketing plan is, your marketing strategy is, and something that's going to reach your targeted customer audience. So I've had examples in the past where I was asked to advertise in magazines or at expos, on websites, and even on the back of appointment cards at the local GP. They were just looking for someone to put their branding on the back to subsidise the cost of them producing those appointment cards, basically. So now there are plenty of examples of organisations, I'm sure, where that would be complementary to their branding and to their target audience. But if you're in an organisation where that wouldn't be the case, then it's not worth pursuing, even if it is a small amount of money. If the other person's coming to you instead of you going to them, then that's probably already a yellow flag that maybe it's not an activity that's sat in your marketing plan. But all the same, it's worth looking at, considering, and asking some questions. Have a think about why they approached you, and also you can ask questions around what's the reach of the product or whatever it is that they're doing. Ask how you get feedback on the numbers of the distribution, where they go. Ask about the demographics of their reach, geographically, where's it going, age-wise, whether you're looking for certain types of people with disability, how many of those people is it going to reach? And what you might soon find out is that instead of 5,000 people that this person's telling you this is going to reach, maybe it's only going to reach 5 people who are really important to you in terms of your target audience. And then you can think about, well, is that actually a worthwhile investment? Sometimes it can be worthwhile taking these opportunities. Historically, in my experience, I've turned down more than I've accepted for strategic reasons. Usually it doesn't fit the strategy. But having a good marketing strategy, plan and budget aligned to your organisation will help you to make good decisions on this and spend your money most effectively. And just coming back to a comment I made earlier about the marketing budget, it is good to have a little bit up your sleeve in the budget, because there are occasionally times where things like this come along and you can say, well, yes, it is a good investment, or, maybe it's questionable, but maybe sometimes it's worth, trying different things out. And a bit like our conversation around social media, the only way to find out sometimes is to try. And if you could have a low cost buy, then sometimes that's a good entry into figuring out if that activity is going to work or not. So that pretty well brings us to the end of our questions for today. Thank you for watching and joining in with us, and we encourage you to take the opportunity to post a question on the CBB Success, NDIS Success page on Facebook, or email us if you've got any other questions or anything is unclear. If you want to have a chat to one of our consultants, then you can click through the website and find details for how to contact us if you want to ask some more questions as well. So our next webinar, and the final one in the series of the management series, is on sustainability in the NDIS. That's going to be available next Tuesday, the 13th of October. And then there'll be a Q&A session a week later on the 20th of October. So both those sessions are going to be focused on finance and financials, and a really important part of working in the NDIS, and a sort of a capstone at the end of this management series of webinars as well. So thank you for joining Jane and I for this Q&A session, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.